My name is Mpodumo, as was mentioned. Just to give you a bit of background of myself, I come from a township in Limpopo called the Bahomu. Grew up there, yes, most of my life, went to school there. I think I got my first exposure to business when I was still living that side at home, when I was in high school. We had those CVs days and everyone was looking good in their labels and etc. And I got a little camera and I started taking photos and etc. So that was sort of my beginning of my journey. The business was quite a mess because I didn't know how to take photos and I had my fingers inside most of the pictures. But yeah, that's how business starts. Nonetheless, when I finished high school, I think like most of you, I came to UCT. This was in 2005. Came to study a BCom in accounting right here. And this is sort of where my journey begins. Today I'm going to share with you a bit about Pimp. I'm sure most of you know Pimp on campus. But I'm going to touch on a lot more on the topic that Upstart is really talking about, looking for gaps. I know you guys are probably going to start projects and studying with the competition, etc. And also looking at how do you do things in unconventional ways. I'll take my journey in business I'm going to use it more as an illustration to some of the things that I talk about. The first thing I want to start with is this quote here. Maybe you can't read it, but I'll read it out loud. One of the bittersweet results of success is that as companies become large, they lose the ability to enter small and emerging markets. So effectively what this guy is saying, he wrote the book, The Innovator's Dilemma. You should read it. It's quite interesting. But what he's saying is that when companies become large, often they don't see sort of the smaller markets and they don't see the emerging markets. Sometimes they don't see them because it's just not profitable for them to go after such a market. Maybe they don't understand it. Maybe they're sitting quite high in their offices. And there are many opportunities sitting out there which they cannot really see or access. And I think to simplify my journey or my understanding of an upstart or an entrepreneurship begins over here. We are on the ground. We are almost like the small guys at the start. And there are many opportunities out there that are sitting, and I'll elaborate more on them, that actually you and I are better fit to go after. Do you know what I mean? A big company cannot do it because they just don't have the cost structures that allows them to do it. Today we speak about the big successes such as your Facebooks, your Apples, etc., all of these guys that are sitting in the USA. And it's amazing. They've done great things. They were started by great entrepreneurs. The guys are rich. The companies are big. And all of us sort of want to be the next Steve Jobs or the next big thing. But I think beyond what large companies are doing or beyond what someone is doing in the USA, there are problems, there are opportunities that we face right here in South Africa, right here on this campus, which a Steve Jobs or a Mark Zuckerberg sitting in Silicon Valley cannot see. They cannot understand it as well as you understand it. Do you know what I mean? And if you actually think about it, majority of the world is actually in developing countries, not in your USAs and your Europes. They're in countries much like ours where we're trying to solve problems such as education, as I'll touch, health, housing, social issues. There's so much out there that we're trying to solve as a country that's developing. And entrepreneurs coming from that side or innovators coming from that side often will not be able to see the solutions as much as what you and I can see it. And what I really want to touch on before I start is that we need to actually open our eyes to see the problems, and I don't want to call them problems because they are actually opportunities that are sitting right next to us. Instead of just always looking abroad or looking for the next big thing, actually looking down and saying, if we can solve problems of education, probably Arthur will touch a lot on, problems of health, there's many, many things that South Africa needs to resolve. We might actually find business concepts that the rest of the developing world, of which are majority in the world, could actually use, and that could be the beginning of an explosion of new products and upstarts. You probably can't see that, but I'll touch a bit on my story, and I want to take, Pimp, it's a small company, but I just want to take you through some of the steps that we went through right here at UCT, right where you're sitting, because I used to sit much like you over there, and just show you some of the challenges and some of the steps that I think, or principles that anyone can use who wants to start a company, who wants to break through, who wants to often go against big companies, big institutions. I started the business when I was in my second year here at UCT, 10 minutes. After my first year, I realized that, textbooks were very expensive. You know what I mean? Most of you understand the whole thing. I'm not going to go through too much. But the way that I started was really in my dormitory room. I lived at Smarts Hall, just down here. But I lived in Smarts Hall, and effectively all it was about was that there are big bookshops out there selling new books. For them, secondhand is kind of like that small opportunity there. Sort of not profitable enough for them, sort of not a key focus because we're making money already in the new book sector. The value chains are already established over there. The supplies are established. It's easy. Why should we take our time and stress about this other market? And that was a really open opportunity for an entrepreneur like myself to get into. So it's much the same in many opportunities that you guys can think of. So we started like that. It was quite simple. I went to my friends, I took their books, I sold them on their behalf, we made commissions, the business started to develop from there. But our core goal was really about how do we make education, or textbooks if you want to put it, more affordable and more accessible. The trick is that students have used textbooks, but we don't have efficient markets where they can meet. You have to call people on notice boards, you have to run around, pricing is not clear. What if you need a book that's no more prescribed here, but it's used at Stellenbosch? That's something most of you don't think about, that, Pimp book, even here at UCT, gets its stock from pretty much across the country. So it was about making those connections and then finding a way to serve students. It is a for-profit business, so also making a profit while doing that. Since then, we started in my dormitory room. We went through a lot of issues, putting a business on campus, especially back then. We never had Upstarts. We never had such organizations like this. I don't think the university was so geared towards entrepreneurship. In fact, I don't even think South Africa back then was as geared as it is now. We're very corporate thinking. We're all going to go work in big corporates one day. I think UCT was geared at churning out students who are ready to be big labor machines in a large corporate. So it was quite hard, to get a stand on a campus. Took us almost a year or so. To get the store that you see here on campus took us 2 years, tendering, convincing the university, and eventually getting in. And in fact, after 2 weeks of getting that store, we were kicked out by one mentioned their name, bigger bookstores, who were like, no, they've got the exclusive agreement to be on campus. And that's actually when we went and opened up outside Pick n Pay in Rondebosch and traded there. But that failure that came from Pick n Pay in Rondebosch actually opened up a new opportunity, because when we were standing there in Rondebosch, other students who were not UCT students came. Students from UNISA came. And that opened my mind to say, hey, there's another market. And from there, we pushed on and opened the UNISA store in Pero, which actually, by the way, today it's our biggest store in terms of size, revenue, etc. And it began to develop like that. So I think coming back to what I'm trying to get to, whatever concepts or ideas that you're looking at, I think it's really about finding the niches. Do you know what I mean? Don't look at a market and say, Edgar's has taken over this market, or say, iPhone controls it. There are niches out there. There are people, there are segments that those guys cannot serve. Do you know what I mean? There are ideas that you have, that you see. Maybe you are like me. You're the actual customer of that product. You can see something that could be done better. Maybe you can even see something in our industry that could be done better, and that is the start of a niche. When you get into a niche market, it's very hard for big guys to compete. The big bookshop couldn't drop prices to get us out. We're using a used model. They couldn't jump into the used textbook market because there weren't systems to run this thing. There weren't models that you could work on. We had to recreate them. Do you see? So I think that would be my major message. But coming from that point of the one store here to the store in Pero, we've actually grown to various campuses, including University of Stellenbosch, University of Free State in Bloemfontein, up to Limpopo as well. And we've continued to push the growth under a similar model of saying there are students out there, they need textbooks. And I must also add, getting onto a campus, if you want to open a store on this campus, it's still a mission today. Do you know what I mean? It's very hard, and you've got to be strategic. One story I'll add is when we were kicked off campus, you're probably wondering how we got back to campus. It took quite a lot of negotiating and thinking with the university, where we actually had to force the bookstore on campus to do second-hand books, me knowing that they would fail at it, and they failed at it, and then the university said, you can't do it, and therefore Pimp Book must come back. But what I'm trying to get in sharing that is to say, you've got to get into those small gaps and use it to build a brand. Another thing that we did with our business was to find different ways of delivering our service. We've launched our online store. I won't have time to go to the online store right now. In fact, it's quite big with our UNISA market, not so big with UCT for some reason, but students from across the country pretty much go online, you sell a book, you don't have to wait at the lines in our store. It gives you a price. We've got a courier comes and fetches it for you, brings it to us, etc. But what I'm trying to get to, and we also have these mobile stores where we've made trailers that we've turned into bookshops and we've sent them out to various campuses. And what I'm trying to get to is that niches can also sit in how you deliver a service. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be in a new product. There could be a new product, and actually I must add this. For South Africa, and I think Africa as a whole, the big issue is about how do you deliver products that are out there in an affordable and accessible way to the markets that are here. Maybe the big malls, the big shops don't work. There's another way of entering into those markets. If you look at Kenya, for example, with M-Pesa, it was how do you deliver banking services in a place where those structures are not there, that infrastructure is not there, and they found innovative ways using phones to do so. And my personal belief, I think, is that the upstart revolution of South Africa, and we talked about the vision for Africa, it's really about finding new business models that can deliver services in places where the big companies cannot reach. You know what I mean? Maybe because there's no malls there, there's no systems there, there's no structures there. And you recreate new ways using technology, using connections to people to actually get into those markets. And there are huge opportunities in doing so. That's important is when you find an opportunity, it's not, it doesn't mean that Pimp Book or myself, I'll always be in used textbooks. The key thing, guys, is to find that gap and get in. It's not about thinking, do I have capital, wasting time? You must get in, because once you get in, you learn the game of business. And the game of business is the same, generally, if you think about it. There are customers, there are products, there are services. So one important thing that we did with Pimp Book was to put the brand ahead at all times. We knew that, as much as we are not a big shop or we're not one of these, I don't want to mention names, but if we went into this niche market called used textbooks, we build a strong brand behind it, we would learn the business. We'd learn how the value chains work. We'd learn who the suppliers are. We'd learn what future technologies are doing. And we'll put ourselves in a position where we actually have the capability to compete with the big guys. A good example of that, I don't know if I can use brands, but it's a very good example. I think Capitec has done this very well, in my view. They've gone into banking in South Africa. They've seen that there was a market that was left out, forgotten by the big guys, probably because it wasn't profitable to bank the lower income market. They took that and they've branded, and I can bet you in the next couple of years, they'll probably become like the major banks using a niche market. And I think for us, that's where a lot of our opportunities lie, to find that opportunity where you can build a brand, where you can learn business without it being too hostile. If you try to take on a large corporate head on, it'll get dirty. You don't want that. You want a space where you can make mistakes. We made lots of mistakes. Our admin processes collapsed because we couldn't administrate properly. Our branding, our stores, we've made so many mistakes, but because we're sitting in a niche, we're able to learn and improve. And by the time that we're actually going to go head on with the larger guys, we've built the capabilities to do so. So I think that's critical. And I think for us, maybe just touching on where we're going forward. I told you we've expanded our stores. We're going national in terms of our expansion, both on our online stores and our physical stores. We're currently looking at a project in Botswana. I think it may work out, and I think that for us will kickstart growing into our neighboring countries. And I think a big one for me now is how do we make technology affordable and accessible on campus? So we have a vision, we envision, and I think Arthur will probably touch more, that probably the next 10, 15 years, hopefully, we'll have universities that are more technology orientated instead of physical books. And we want our core aim to be to bring students affordable and accessible devices. So we're sort of using a similar business model to what we're doing, where we're getting in devices, laptops, we're refurbishing, pumping them up, and we're pushing them out. We've piloted it in our apparel store. It's going quite well. We're doing it online as well, and we'll come to UCT. But as you know, you've got to negotiate. You've got to talk to the big bosses. We're busy with all those, trying to convince the structures to move. It does take time. And we'll launch this, and once we launch this, it will go in with our current textbook product. My aim is that within a year and a half or so, we should be 50% textbooks, 50% in tech, and we're rolling it out across all the institutions that we're in. So I think, yeah, that's pretty much my story in terms of Pimp, my book. But I think for you guys, maybe some of you are still I've got one more minute, still thinking, should I carry on? Maybe you're studying a big degree. Should I carry on? Should I go into business? Should I find a job? I'm very passionate about pushing young, smart people like you to get into business. So I'll close with that. You know, I believe one of the reasons South Africa has got a low entrepreneurship, whatever they call it, like the ecosystem is quite low. We don't have enough entrepreneurs. I actually believe it's because of you and I. That's my firm belief. In South Africa, we've left entrepreneurship to people who often don't have the opportunities you have. It's not that they're failures in business, but we've left it to people who went into business because they're desperate often and they need to live. And it doesn't mean they won't be successful businesses, but you and I, with the education that this country has given us, with the opportunities that we have a far better chance of succeeding in business. And I'm not anti-corporate, but we can't waste our talent sitting in large organizations when there's a nation and a continent out there to build. There are opportunities out there that are waiting for your idea to make it work. Thanks, Betsy.